So Canada has qualified for the Copa America this summer. But what are the questions in terms of roster, especially that we've learned in the games against Jamaica and Trinidad? Well, let's talk about it real quick. So Canada has qualified for the Copa America happening this summer in the States. They are one of 6 CONCACAF teams, along with Costa Rica, Panama, Jamaica, Mexico, and the U.S. They'll be facing the CONMEBOL teams to crown this year's Copa America. Now, we can talk about the game. We'll have something up there later. But where does this leave Canada, I think, looking at this game? What are the lessons that we can take from here? Here are my quick thoughts, because everybody loves some quick thoughts here. So if you're new to the channel, we do primarily African and Canadian content, because we'll be the Africans, we didn't do both. So let's get to it. Looking at this roster, I think this is another example of where Canada put on a starting 11 and their talent was able to get the job done today. I don't know if Biello has done anything to help himself with the position, but that is where we are. Looking at the pool now, I think it's an interesting conversation to say, what do we do? And do we actually have more problems than we realize? I think that's a fair conversation to have. Looking at from the goalies, I think Maxime Crépeau probably starting off as the keeper would be great. I think I'll echo a lot of other people's thoughts where we say it would not be a bad idea to get some of these other goalkeepers some time. A second friendly in that June window would be ideal. You're playing the Netherlands in the first game, find another team, whether it's in Ireland, whether it's a Greece, whether it's like any other country that's not a high-ranking Scotland, Wales. Let's go Team Commonwealth. Heck, if Australia's in Europe, let's play them. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to get another friendly where we can test some of that depth, because you don't get to test your depth in other situations, so you might as well try to do it in these types of situations. And go to the back line. I'm going to include fullbacks in this conversation. I don't think we've ever had this many center backs who could all arguably play. Moise Bombito is on his way. Luc de Fougerolles, who plays the center back, Jamie Labelle also. Those are options coming through. So from the center backs, Kamal Miller, Waterman, McNaught's been playing well. You still have players like Kyle Ebert, who's getting back on the pitch. The choices at center back have never been so plentiful for Canada. In the same breath, we actually low-key do lack fullbacks. It's something that I took away from this game thinking about it, because the only 2 fullbacks, proper fullbacks, that we brought to this Trinidad game were Alphonso Davies, if you want to call him that, Alistair Johnston. That's a tweet. If you think Luc de Fougerolles eventually becomes that, if you don't think he does, I understand that thought as well. But with no Sam Adekudbi, with no Richie Larea, we don't have fullback depth. And that's a little bit of a surprise. Where do you want to find that? I think that's a question in terms of youth that you'll have to find. Or if you want to go back into the MLS, if you can find good performing players, whether that's a Norman Bassong, whether that's a Kashan Ferdinand, Luca Petrasso, players who can play fullbacks, let me know, comments below, because I think in Europe the options are a little bit limited there. Even if you want to go to a Didier Abzi as a potential option playing in the Spanish League too. That is a question I think we have to really address, whether that's with youth. And again, the U20s could be playing as well, so maybe that's an opportunity for a young player to take a big step up. But we don't have many healthy fullbacks, and I think that might hammer and slot in some players into positions for this year, which isn't a bad thing, because I think it opens it up, which is also the other point. I think we need to hammer down the rules for these players. And I think based off of what the depth is, I think ultimately Davies as a fullback or a wingback is the way forward. And I think when we get to the midfield, which is a very fair conversation to have, I think right now, based off the depth, we can same conversation with fullbacks. We don't have many 6s, unless you're holding out hope for, say, a Justin Smith to continue to develop and reach that level. I don't think Victor Latourie is going to get a shot unless he really picks up his game this summer. which means from a 6 standpoint, does answer the question why Herdman was playing him as a 6 of the Gold Cup, even though many of us felt just play him as a center back, that's where he profiles better. I think they were trying to find a solution there, and that could have possibly pushed it up. But I think from this point, based off the depth that we have, unless you're going to play Liam Fraser there, I think the answer is Eustachio at the 6, and then you have Kone at the 8 or as a dual, and moving forward. I think based off the talent that we have, the Mathieu Chouaniers, even emerging players coming through like a Jaden Nelson, who's more of an 8 roaming into a 10 role type of a player. I think if you're going to play a midfield trio, either a rotational one or a very fluid one, where either of the players can move up or move back, would be the ideal. A 4-2-3 where you have a specific 10, we also don't have that profile. But I think based off of what our pool is, I think the best option would be going with that midfield trio with a holding and then dual 8s. But as a good shout out, keep your eyes peeled and looking for a player like Simon Colline, who's playing out in the Eredivisie. He wouldn't be a bad player who we can continue to develop in that 10 cam role. If not, you'd have to be looking at young players establishing themselves, whether it's a Jesse Costa, whether it's Lucas Dias getting minutes at Calvary, but I don't think they would give him that jump just so soon. But I think the midfield has a conversation which says, hey, it might be time to go, if you're going to go trio in the midfield, a Mathieu Chouanier, maybe you want to bring in a Jaden Nelson, but I think that's where it is. Which brings my next one moving up the pitch. I think Canada's emerging talent is out wide and up top, which means I think, to echo what we said earlier, kneeling Alphonso Davies in that fullback role or that wingback role, if you want to play a back 3 and play more of a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-4-3. I think Davies further back now unlocks more opportunities for the player and allows him to do something that he hasn't been able to do really well in a while, which is put pressure on a defense with him without the ball. I think giving him the space and his ability to create space would be much more useful overlapping. I know he likes to have the ball on his feet. I think ultimately this is a player that you can use his speed to really put pressure on the defense without him having to control the game. He can control the game without having the ball. I think he has the ability to do that here. But looking at the players that emerge, Jacob Schaffelberg, you have Tejan, who hasn't played much, but is starting to find his feet, we hope, and will get some more consistent playing time as the year goes on. I think Tejan there, you have Jacob Schaffelberg, you had Liam Miller, who's playing well, Theo Cobriano, who's been playing well in Granada, getting minutes here and there. And then you throw in the Nelsons of the world and so forth. There's enough talent. And plus, if you want to look at veterans, you give yourself time for a veteran, maybe a player like a Junior Hoylett or a Jonathan Sawyer to gain some more form to get back to the national team. I think there's a lot of talent there that would really emerge and create a lot of possibilities going into COPA. When it comes to the 9s, I mean, what a time where you have 4 informed 9s to choose from. But I think at this point, Jonathan David looks like a player who can occupy that second striker role, but I don't think he's a creative 10 as of yet. Jason Russell-Rowe profiles more like him in terms of being able to carry the ball, create, not just turn and play back and go, really create pressure, especially leading up to that second goal for Canada. But then Bear, Ugbo, and Laren kind of fit the same space. I think if that's the case, finding opportunities and spaces where you can test those players out against competition would be ideal. When will that be? I'm not sure. But I wouldn't be opposed to playing a half with your starters, but then seeing what other players can do against top competition. You need to know this because can you trust them in tight situations? We won't know until we trust them. So let's give them the opportunity to see. But the 9 depth is interesting. I don't think they should ever go to that 3 striker form again because I don't think they have the creativity. It's something I always say. When high stress situations go, players will always go back to their default settings. And in that situation, you saw David, who was trying to sit in that 10 creative role. I've always envisioned Canada playing a 4-2-3-1 as with David more of that creative 10, or more of that second striker 10 and less the creative. In one game against a low block, I don't think this is the best representation. However, we did see some of the flaws, which is on the low block, everyone's just going to occupy the space. No one's trying to pick locks. No one's trying to find those spaces. And I think ultimately that's what made the game a little bit more frustrating. That and their inability to have good set pieces. But overall, Canada's going to the Copa America. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. And I think we'll wrap it up from here.